The following thrilling story is presented for your enjoyment. This classic work is now in the public domain, making it freely available to be shared and appreciated by all. Some elements may appear outdated or insensitive by today's standards, but we present this work in its original form to preserve its historical context and literary significance. Sit back, relax, and indulge in this timeless tale. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share every.
Revenge of the Dead by Jesse Merlin from Beware Mer 14, March 1953, Dead Men Walk, a chilling tale of vengeance beyond death. You've got to believe me. I don't believe in ghosts either, but you've got to believe me when I tell you this, or I'll go insane. I think maybe I'm going crazy now, the way you're looking at me. I saw a dead man walk. Believe me, he was dead, and yet he walked. Let's start at the beginning. This has been an awful night, a horrible night. Any night when dead men walk. All right, you don't believe me now, but you will. Just let me tell my story. I'm a doctor. I work here at the hospital. I'm in charge of the accident ward. My name is Dr. Henry Collins. They bring in some pretty awful things to this accident ward. Last week they brought in 2 headless corpses, and the police had the 2 heads too. Seems these 2 people had been riding up front in the car, and they had an accident, and the windshield glass cut their heads off. You should have seen the faces on the heads. The faces were so calm and peaceful. The accident must have happened so fast. But the bodies were horrible to look at. Even though I'm a doctor, I'll always remember those bloody, headless necks. The police carried the heads in separate canvas bags. But tonight, less than an hour ago, I saw an even more gruesome thing than those headless corpses. As I just told you, I'm a scientist, a doctor. I shouldn't believe in ghosts or walking corpses. But I do. I was on duty here at the accident ward, and there hadn't been much doing tonight. I sewed up an ugly knife wound that some hold-up man had slashed into his victim's neck, but that was easy. Then I had settled down to reading my medical journals, and the night got stiller and darker. You know, there's no moon out tonight. And these night lights in the hospital corridor are pretty dim. My reading lamp is the only bright spot on this first floor at 3 a.m. in the morning. My nurse had gone upstairs for a cup of coffee. I was alone, and then I heard a low moan come out of the dark corridor. I'm used to moaning and the screams and sighs of men who die in pain. I thought the moan came from some sick bed. I started to get up to find the sick man so that I might comfort him. Then that low moan came again, almost in my ear. It was a man standing beside me. His head and face were covered with blood. And no wonder. There was a hole along the top of his forehead where a bullet had grazed his skull. He moaned again and clutched his belly. I wasn't scared. Not then, but I am now. I thought he was just a sick man, some gangster who'd been shot. He'd been shot all right, and I stopped thinking about everything except helping him. I got him onto the table there, and he kept holding his belly, and he kept up that awful moaning sound. And I rang for the nurse, and rang again, but I guess she didn't hear me up in the kitchen. And pretty soon I was too busy and then too scared to call for anybody. When I got this bloody-headed man stretched out, I started to cut the clothes off him, and then I saw why he'd been clutching his middle, and why his hands were red with blood too. He had 3 bullet holes in the upper abdomen, and one of them was on a slant, and the bullet must have lodged near his heart. And yet he walked in, and he was still alive, and he was still moaning with pain. I saw there wasn't much I could do for him. I reached for the ether mask to put him out of his misery and put him to sleep. I knew he was going to die, any second. And then he began to talk, grumbling and moaning to himself, his eyes shut tight with pain and agony, and I listened to him until he died. "I'll get him," that's what he said. "I'll get him. I'll get the rat who shot me, the double-crossing rat. He won't live long." And then he died. I'm a doctor. I should know when people die. I tell you, he died. He groaned once and rolled open his eyes, and then the mortal life went out of him. He had no heartbeat, no pulse, no breath. Started to get cold. He was dead. Dead. I figured that I wouldn't disturb anybody in the hospital, especially not my nurse who had gone to get coffee. I walked over to the phone. It's on the wall there, about 15 feet from where the corpse was lying on that table. And I started to lift the phone receiver to call the police, to report a DA arrival, a dead after. But I never did phone, because I felt a cold breath of wind behind me, and I knew that something had changed in the room. Suddenly, I was afraid to turn around, but I had to, and now I'm sorry I did. What I saw, the dead man was still on the table, but he was standing beside me too. He still had that hole in his forehead, and his face was red with blood, and his hands, they dripped blood. But the awful thing that was standing beside me, its eyes were open. They were blazing into mine, but with a cold fire, with a light from the dead. And the voice that came from the apparition, this ghost thing beside me, the voice was low and cold, colder and older and more terrible than any voice I'd ever heard. I knew it was a voice from the dead. "Don't bother to call the police," said this ghost double of the murdered man on the table. "I'll get the man who killed me. I'll bring him back myself." I guess I must have fainted. I don't remember anything except looking into those cold eyes, those cold dead eyes without any light. And even while I was looking into the eyes, the whole body of the man and his bloody face seemed to shimmer and waver and sort of float away, or walk away. And I saw that the body of the walking dead man was pretty solid, and yet I could see the lights of the corridor shining through his body, and yet his eyes were still in the air above me, beside me, looking deep into mine. And that's when I fainted. I must have fainted, because now that I'm remembering it all, now that I'm telling you exactly how it happened, I recall that I came to and I was lying on the icy marble floor of this accident ward. And as I gained consciousness, I started to remember what I had last seen. You know, those dead eyes staring into mine and that transparent and yet somehow solid body inch off down the room and starting down the corridor, the body swirling off into the dim lights and the moonless night outside. And then it happened again. Get this. There I was lying on the floor and just beginning to try to convince myself that I hadn't seen any ghostly eyes or thin-as-air phantom body. I was just convincing myself that I had been working too hard, that I was too tired, that my weary mind had been playing tricks, and then in walked two dead men. You've got to believe me. The ghost corpse that I had imagined or seen walk out was now walking in again, the lights still shining through his body and his body swirling and mist-like, and yet his hands and his face still red with blood. And beside him was a man, a real man, only this man was dead too. I knew this second man was dead, because his tongue was twisted and hanging out of his mouth, and his eyes were rolled up so you could see only the whites, and there were black red marks on his throat where somebody's hands had strangled him. I tell you, that man was dead, strangled, and yet he walked in here with a man who'd been shot dead, or with the ghost of a man who'd been shot dead. And the two things came up to me, to where I was lying on the floor there, the one solider body and the wavy, cloud-like body of the man I'd first seen die. I reeled up from my knees. I tried to throw off the horror that was numbing my mind. I fought to keep my sanity, and then the first dead man, the ghost thin one, he spoke again. "I brought him back, doctor." The voice was cold, unhuman, dead. "I strangled the rat who shot me. I found him, and I strangled him, and now he's dead, but yet I'm making him walk back here with me." That's what the ghost said. I swear I'm not insane. I'm a doctor, a scientist. I wouldn't be talking about ghosts or swirling bodies or strangled men unless I'd actually seen them. I tell you that a dead man got off a hospital table and walked out of here and then came walking back with another corpse. And then I fainted again. And I guess the nurse found me on the floor here and called you. You're the police. You admit that you saw the gunfight that wounded the first corpse that died here. And you still think I'm insane, don't you? You don't believe in ghosts. You don't think I saw walking dead men. All right, take a look at that table over there. The table where I put the first dying man. There are two dead men on that table, aren't there? And one of them has been shot to death, and the other one has been strangled, all in the last hour, and I haven't been out of this hospital room. Now, do you believe what I saw? You've got to believe me. Yes, you're believing me. It's all true.